Hello there. Is this Willie?
This is Willie. Richard, how you doing?
Hi, Willie in Billings.
We'll talk about the band Television a little bit, but I want to go even further back and talk about some of your musical tastes growing up. I know that you had a brush with Jimi Hendrix at one time.
A brush. Yeah, quite a brush. But,
Tell us a little bit about that.
well, I was at a friend's house, and the gang of us were after school, and the phone rang, and it was his parents, checking in on him. And then the phone rang again, and he got off the phone. He looked really disappointed. His name was Zeke. We said, why? He said, oh, it's this kid, scrawny black kid from Brooklyn I know who claims he knows Jimi Hendrix, and there's nothing I can do about it. He's out of his mind. And everybody said, well, how do you know that, and so it became this big thing of let's laugh at him. I didn't think that was very fair. 10 minutes later, he showed up, and when the door opened, I was sitting opposite the door, and I looked at Velvet, and I said, yep, without a question of a doubt, he knows Jimi Hendrix. And it happened that he did, and he called Jimmy at the hotel room, not under his own name, of course, and everybody laughed. And he handed the phone around. See, it's ringing. And when it got to me, Jimmy picked up and said, hey, man, what's happening? Who is this? It was like, 4 o'clock. So we'd woken him up from a nap. And I said, what am I going to do? Say, it's Richard Lloyd, Jimmy? You know me. You don't know me. So I said, it's Velvet, Jimmy. And I handed the phone to Velvet. And then he said, after he got off the line, everybody wanted to know what he said. He said, well, he's playing tonight, and I get to take somebody. I'm invited, and I'm going to take, and he spun around like a pirouette and then pointed at me.
Nice.
I suppose because I was the only one that believed in it.
There you
And
go.
we became best friends for life, really. And then we followed Jimmy around all the time.
Oh, that's
I
great.
got to be in the studio with him, and
Did you ever jam with
I never. No, oh my God. He was 25. I was 16, 17. The age difference is so large. I figured I had a rule of thumb. I met most of the Allman Brothers, the Grateful Dead, the Who, Led Zeppelin. I met all those people that I wanted to get close to figure out what aura they had. But I also figured out that I wasn't going to be a friend. They're friends. And, we had very little in common in that sense. I was just an up-and-coming guitar player, barely could play very well. And I figured the best approach was to be completely silent. And so one time I ended up in the dressing room, just me and Led Zeppelin. Everybody else has gotten kicked out unceremoniously with a lot of curse words. And I thought, well, that's not very polite. I'm not going anywhere until I'm asked nicely. So I ended up, and then the singer, whose nickname is Percy, Robert Plant, turned around and did a double take, like, there's somebody sitting there. And he went out in the hall and he yelled, Richard Cole, who is that? And Richard came up to me and he said, who are you? And he says, I told him my name. He said, well, would you please leave? And I said, of course, as long as you put it like that, I'd be happy to.
teaching manners to Led Zeppelin?
Well, to his manager. And the first time we saw Jimmy, he was on a revolving stage. And they claimed that you couldn't tell because it only went around at 3 degrees per minute or something. It's the first time I ever saw a wave, because when Jimmy was in front of people were standing up with their jaws
Oh,
dropped.
sure. I bet that was
It was
incredible.
like looking into a nuclear furnace. I've never seen a film. I've never heard a recording that captures that.
I bet.
Maybe the new there's a release of him at the Atlanta Festival.
Uh-huh.
And the beginning of that reminds me of how he was. But I've never seen a film of him that captures him. It was literally like looking into a nuclear furnace, but on the street, because we hung out about a block from where he lived, the school kids. And he would walk by with a girl or by himself, and we'd just say, this is New York, you don't pick out celebrities and ask for autographs. You just say, hey, Jimmy. He goes, how you doing, guys? And, he was a very shy fellow.
That is so cool. What a cool story.
Yeah. Well, I got lots of stories about that. and about bumping into Keith Moon and having a fight about who was dressed better at a Mott the Hoople concert.
Oh, great.
And on and on and on. And we could go on for hours. And I'm trying to write all this down from my memoirs in little chapters, vignettes, you know?
Beautiful. Can't wait to read that.
Like the time I went, I didn't have money to go, so I went to sound check for the Grateful Dead, and I asked Jerry Garcia. I walked up and said, Jerry, between songs, you know, Jerry, I'm a school guy. I spent my allowance. I'm a big fan. I want to come see you. Could you put me on the guest list? And he said, oh, I'm sorry, man. And my guest list is stuff full of professional people, you know, from the record company. He says, hey, Phil, calling out to Phil Lesh. He says, you got room on your guest list? And Phil said, I don't know anybody in New York. I got plenty of room. So I got put down +1 for the Grateful Dead. And we were backstage during the Who's, Velvet and I, backstage, because he used to call up the Fillmore and imitate Jimmy's voice so perfectly. And Jimmy would say, hey, this is Jimmy now. I was thinking of coming down and you let my friends in. They're coming down also, but they may not come with me.
Nice.
You know, so put Velvet and Richard down +1. And so we were at that famous show, the debut of Tommy, where the place next door caught fire, and they evacuated the entire Fillmore.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't go. I said, Velvet, do you smell smoke? He said, no. I said, do you want to leave? He said, no. So we went back and ate grapes in the dressing room.
Oh, man.
Waiting for the band and everybody to come back.
That's great.
And the Allman Brothers, they're throwing a party before they go on. And that's the first time I ever saw what's called a strobe tuner, a strobicon. And I'm wondering, how the hell is a guy tuning guitars in the middle of a party, you know, with all these people making noise?
Right.
And I asked him, and he said, well, it's a lot of money, you know, and but I've got to have it. It's my instrument, you know, to tune the guitars.
Cool.
So I have stories galore like that. Growing up in Manhattan in the 60s, we knew if you talked about a rocket to the moon, we were in the top of the rocket. There were 3 real main places: New York, London, and Los Angeles. That, you know, culture came from at that time in the mid 60s. So we were right in the middle of it.
Right. And a lot of people might not be totally familiar with the band Television, but I can guarantee you that many of the bands that they know were influenced by Television, because I've done a ton of these interviews, and your band's name has come up many, many times from a lot of musicians.
Yeah. REM, even U2 have claimed us as fans. They said if they hadn't heard Marquee Moon, they probably wouldn't have been a band. And Bono apologized when receiving the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He said he was ashamed to be voted in before Television.
Yeah, I remember that.
But Television only made 2 records, and then we disbanded for 11 years.
Right.
According to the sun cycle, you know, the 18-year sun cycle.
Okay.
It's the eclipse cycle called the Saros cycle. I'm a scientist as well as a musician. I went to an all-science school, high school, and I went to 3 days of college and decided it was not worth going. I had a guitar that I took to school the last 2 years, so I didn't graduate at the top of my class because the physics teacher came over and said, "Where's your books?" I asked to put out the books. I said, "It's in the box." And he said, "Well, open the box." I opened the box, and there was a Stratocaster. He said, "That doesn't look like a physics school book to me." I said, "You don't know much about the instrument then, do you? You've got me for 45 minutes. Why don't you go teach? You've wasted 6 minutes." I was a pretty mouthy guy, so of course I went to the principal, where I slapped down on his desk a statistical report describing the IQ of the average Stuyvesant High School student against the probability of the IQ of a Stuyvesant High School teacher. And the students won.
When did the meeting with John Lee Hooker take place?
I was living in Boston because a lot of my friends went up there to Berkeley and University of Massachusetts in Boston, BU. And I was at Jazz Workshop, which is a little club, and they had blues, and John Lee Hooker was playing. I was sitting in the dressing room doing my bit of being quiet, and he turned to me and he said, "And you, young man, what you do?" I said, "I play guitar." He says, "Are you good?" I said, turned my hand He said, no, you great. You one of the greats. Now get over here. I'll tell you the secret of playing the electric guitar. And I went over, and honest to God, he cupped his hands and whispered into my ear, "All them cats playing 6-string guitar, Richie, they ain't," foul word. They ain't nothing. They ain't nothing. I'll tell you the secret. You go home, you take off all the string but one. Then you play that one string up and down and down and up, and you bend it and shake it till the woman go, woo. Then you put on 2 strings, and you bend them and shake them and pull them and push them until the girls go, ooh, and the men go, ah. And Richie, by the time you get to 6 strings, you'd be a master. And, of course, I couldn't afford to take off 5 strings of my guitar. But Jimmy had already taught us what's known as vertical knowledge. That's knowledge, so I can go from the 1st fret to the 13th fret without thinking about it,
Wow.
In fact, the solo on Elevation has one of those, moves up the G string from the 2nd fret to the 5th fret to the 14th fret, like that.
Wow. Awesome.
You'd be amazed to know that two of the songs on Jimmy's first records, the solos are entirely on 1 string.
That is incredible.
I Don't Live Today, and what's that one? Is Waterfall.
Yeah, Waterfalls.
That entire solo's on the B string.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
the
it goes.
Guitarist would know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That is a great
all on 1 string. Quite amazing. But basically, Velvet was his only guitar student, and then I lived really nearby, so he would come over, and we would practice together. Then I went to Los Angeles and fell in a lot of swimming pools at big record company parties. And after that, I heard there was a scene in New York and drove back. And as I was driving back, the Mercer Arts Center fell down. So there was no scene.
And this was before CBGB's?
Yeah, well, we basically took over CBGB's because it stands for Country, Bluegrass, and Blues.
Right.
We turned it into a rock club because we needed a place to play that nobody else would want. So we picked this dump.
Starting on the worst night of the week?
Well, what happened is he said no rock music, and our manager, Terry Ork, who, by the way, a book is about to come out about him in October, along with a whole bunch of Ork Records stuff, which I'm a part of. And he said, "Listen, what's your worst night?" And he said, "Sunday. I don't even open sometimes." He says, "Well, put my band on a Sunday. I guarantee you'll make better at the bar than on your best night, which is Saturday." Terry said, "Because everyone I'm going to invite is an alcoholic." And we did well, and that was the beginning of it. We got 4 Sundays in a row, then we got 2 days, and we got 3 days in a row. And we didn't know it, but all these other bands were looking for something like that, a place to play,
right?
Original music. So, we didn't know Talking Heads, Blondie, Ramones, so on and so forth. They found the place, they heard about this place. But Lenny Kaye, the writer at the time, and who was friends with Patti Smith, brought her down to see Television. And about a year after we had started to pack the place, she came in and did a bunch of shows. So it kind of took off. It was like, for me, who was there every night, basically because I got free booze and I like to hang out anyway. It was that or Max's Kansas City back room.
Right.
It was like hosting a 3.5-year New Year's Eve party.
Sure,
and it was also like a nest. It was like a nest with little eggs, And as each one hatched, the record company would swoop down and take them away. Then they couldn't play CBs anymore,
Uh-huh.
Because they got too big.
Right. Well, man, this has been fascinating, and I could sit here and listen to you tell stories all day, but I don't want to take up much of your time. Maybe I'll get a chance to see you on Friday.
Well, you don't want to take up your listeners' time either, do you?
I'm sure they're enjoying it. Absolutely.
All right. Well, you have a good time, and hopefully you'll get to say hello
Cool, man. Thanks a
when
lot.
we're in Billings.
We'll see you then.